la que, com- la que comparte el PowerPoint. Así que si me das un momento, vamos a hacerlo. Bien, ok. Muy bien. Oh, no, hay que abrirlo. Hay que abrirlo, ya es tarde. Llevo todo el día en eso. Ok, un momento. Y ahora vamos a ver si funciona. Si alguien me puede confirmar que se ve.
Sí.
No, tú no, Tom.
Yep.
Se ve
Se ve.
perfecto.
Yep.
Ok. Adelante, Alfa. No, sorry, you're on mute. You're on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
And you need to start again.
Yeah, I just want to first apologize for my cough. I've been down with a cold the past 5 days. So sorry if I cough during the presentation.
Oh, don't worry. I hope you're okay.
Can you get closer to the microphone?
Can you turn up the sound a little bit or get a bit closer?
Is that okay?
That's good.
Perfect.
Yeah? All right, good. So I'm a first year full-time postgraduate researcher going into my second year this October as a full-time PhD student at the University of Nottingham. My research focuses on the alfabetizados, the newly literate in the Cuban literacy campaign, the question of whose agency is not adequately examined in the existing scholarly literature. The research seeks to study the alfabetizados through their cartas a Fidel, their letters. Its main question is to ask how the alfabetizados understood and responded to the literacy campaign. The key research techniques and method involve an engagement with primary and secondary historiographical sources, application of sociological and pedagogic theory, archive research, collection and interpretation of qualitative data. This presentation that I'm doing today is only based on a small sample of cartas. However, I plan to study and analyze a larger compilation of the cartas a Fidel in this October 2024 when I was during my field work. All the cartas a Fidel in this presentation are reproduced in their original spelling, grammar, and punctuation. I will translate some cartas into English, but not all. First slide is the symbols of the literacy campaign. First of all, we have the Chinese lantern, which symbolizes a lack of electricity in the countryside, the existence of counter-revolutionaries operating in the areas, and the international solidarity of China. The lantern, specifically, I would argue, emphasizes the agency of the alfabetizados regarding the timetable of lessons. The teaching programs, Alfabeticemos, for the manual for the alfabetizadores, those who were teachers, it is estimated that 500,000 copies were produced. The second book is a primer for the alfabetizados, Venceremos. 1,500,000 copies of the cartilla were printed. The manual is divided into 3 parts: Orientaciones para el alfabetizador, a guide to the alfabetizador about the relationship between the themes of the manual and the lessons of the primer. Number 2, Temas de Orientación Revolucionario, an exposition of the 24 themes in the manual. And number 3, Vocabulario, a list of words used in the manual. The first page of the manual declares that a school is a communion between teacher and pupil everywhere, that a school is not necessarily a building because classes can be given anywhere, even under a tree. The teacher's manual developed themes such as La Revolución, in which it says, I quote, people need revolution for development and advancement. When the wealth of a nation is in the hand of another nation, there needs to be a revolution to recover that wealth. When the humble men and women of a country live without work, without land to cultivate, without education, they need to have a revolution. End of quote. The vocabulary on page 79 to 98 is very simple, yet rich in revolutionary words. The primer, Venceremos, has 15 lessons connected to the social and economic realities of the alfabetizados. Each lesson is illustrated with a photograph that help capture the motivation of the alfabetizados in providing them with a conversation about aspects of their own daily life. And you see also a campesino displaying a Cuban flag on the horse. I wonder if it's a symbol of a sense of belonging. We'll come back to that. A couple of alfabetizados also having their lesson. Second slide, please, Pa. Since the beginning of January 1959, Cuba has been in La Revolución. What Cubans refer to as La Revolución to this day is an ongoing process. Their La Revolución is a living thing seen by Cubans as constantly being under attack. Hence, there's a persistent and sustained reminder that, I quote, todo es por la revolución. In March 1959, one of the first measures adopted by the new government was the creation of the National Literacy and Basic Commission, which would later become the National Literacy Commission, organized into technical, propaganda, finance, and publication department. This commission was tasked to train on the techniques of teaching adults how to read and write. One of the main laws enacted by the government, the new government, was the Agrarian Reform Law, which was signed on 17th of May 1959 by Fidel Castro. It is claimed, the first most important class issue of La Revolución. A National Institute of Agrarian Reform, INRA, was created to help the farmers in the struggle against illiteracy. Its purpose was not solely to provide farmers with support on education and cultural needs, but also to enforce expropriation of land and distribution of land to the Cuban. In the 1st of September 1960, Fidel Castro addressed the United Nations and told the General Assembly, in fact to the world, but mainly to the Cuban people back home, that in a year he proposed to eradicate illiteracy in Cuba, and Cuba would be the first country in the Americas to be declared free of illiteracy. In January 1961, the literacy campaign had its first martyr, 18-year-old Black volunteer Conrado Benitez Garcia. In April 1961, the Bay of Pigs was an invasion sponsored by counter-revolutionaries helped by the CIA, and then invaded Cuba. It is written that within 72 hours, the invasion was defeated. And then Cuba declared the socialist character of La Revolución. Excuse me. In May, the entire education system was earmarked for nationalization to be enacted on the 6th of June 1961. On the 22nd of December 1961, Cuba became Territorio Libre de Analfabetismo, and the illiteracy rate went from 23.6% down to 3.9%. Next slide, please, Pa. 50 years later, the 50th anniversary of the literacy campaign, 1961-2011, was celebrated at the Faculty of Communication, University of Havana on the 12th of November 2011. More than 300 alfabetizadores, the teachers, sent photos and testimonies. 100 of them took part in the commemoration at the university. Here are some of their testimonies compiled in Juventud Rebelde in February 2012. La campaña nos hizo crecer como hombres y mujeres, como revolucionarios definidos, como personas responsabilizadas con hacer cumplir la palabra empeñada. Gilda Vega Cruz, La Habana. Now here, Gilda is talking about how the literacy campaign helped them grow and become more of a woman or a man than they were when they left the countryside, and how, as campaign educators, they became better citizens and better revolutionaries to achieve the goals set by the architect of the literacy campaign. For Gilda and for her compatriots, her colleagues, it was like the coming of age, a rite of passage. The other quote, fue la época en que aquella juventud comenzó a creer que no solo estaba lista para cambiar Cuba, también para salvar al mundo. El pequeño David se travestia en Goliath de la rendición humana. This is the deputy editor of Juventud Rebelde, Ricardo Ronquillo Bello, in 2012. And Abendroth wrote, when young people feel value, they can become inspired. Most scholars have written extensively about the literacy campaign with a particular focus on the alfabetizadores, young and old, black, white, or mulatto, male or female. They have narrated their journey from innocent young girl or young boy who left their safe and comfortable environment in the urban areas, whether through consent or dissent, to discover new space symbolized by the rural and mountainous areas of the countryside. The energetic and enthusiastic Conrado Benitez brigadistas, these alfabetizadores, were described as being full of excitement, being ethically exhilarated to participate in the national literacy campaign as members of an army of liberation, even as missionaries of culture. As adults, they have featured in the literature through testimonies or celebrated as actors. The alfabetizador was sung in the Himno de la Alfabetización as la vanguardia de la revolución, who through the valleys and the mountain sheds the light of literacy to the countryside by vanquishing the intolerable darkness of ignorance. Fidel Castro said to the departing brigadistas in Maradero on the 14th of May 1961, I think it was Mother's Day, what we do will be an example to the world. So the pequeño David indeed this translation into Goliath. However, there is a relative neglect of the alfabetizados in the literature. Rarely have the alfabetizados features in the literature as subject. The alfabetizados are merely seen through the word of the alfabetizadores as narrators or simply as statistics. They often mention as numbers when citing the rate of illiteracy or when referencing the existence of the thousands of the cartas a Fidel kept in the Literacy Museum written by these alfabetizadores. The cartas a Fidel seem to have served many purposes. Richard Fagan, 1969, identified two. First, they gave a special importance and individuality to the end of the process of becoming literate. Second, they lent variety and gave human meaning to the statistics in the newspaper. Next slide, please, Bob. No one is too old to learn, and I will add, no one is too young to teach. The Carta of Maria, the Carta of Modeste says, Cooperativa Manuel Brito, 29 de noviembre 1961. Compañero Fidel Castro, le hago esta carta para que sepa que ya estoy alfabetizada. Gracias a usted y a la revolución. Tengo 49 años, pero eso no fue obstáculo para aprender. Sin más, Modeste Sanudo González. Exactly. Saying that although she was 49 years old, it wasn't an obstacle for her to learn how to read and write. Maria de la Cruz Santamaria, the 106-year-old, taught by her younger black alfabetizadora Angela Ruz de Spain, she would have grown up as a slave with the full knowledge that learning to read, let alone to write, was either a separation from her parent by being sold or a death sentence. She decided to learn to read and write because she believed that no one was too old to learn. This alfabetizado would have been born in 1855, 2 years after Jose Marti's birth and before the abolition of slavery in Cuba. She would have possibly have heard of Jose Marti. In fact, when she received the visit of Fidel Castro, she mentioned Marti as the apostol and asked Fidel Castro ¿Y usted? Fidel replied, yo soy un discípulo de Martí. I am a disciple. Maria de la Cruz, at 106, demonstrate that the Cuban literacy campaign was not just about providing basic and functional literacy. Equally does the youngest alfabetizador, who was the 8-year-old Ellen Menendez, and whose picture is at the Literacy Museum. Slide number 5, please, Paul. The alfabetizador's professional development. Dr. Castro, le escribo estas pocas letras para que sepa que en el año de la educación acabo de aprender a leer y escribir gracias a los brigados Conrado Benítez y estoy dispuesto a superarme para el año de la industrialización. Se despide de usted un campesino, patria o muerte venceremos, cultos, sí, analfabetos, no, Esteban Sánchez Martínez. As Mark Abendroth stated, I quote, there also were words of how they felt themselves at the end of the campaign and how much they continued to study. So the decision to study further came from the alfabetizados themselves. This suggests that the alfabetizados decided to continue their study with a view to consciously integrating themselves in the Cuban revolutionary process rather than being integrated by others in the new society as it is suggested in the literature. Slide number 6, please, Paul. Pride in signing your name. Dr. Fidel Castro, le hago estas líneas para darle las gracias por haber aprendido a leer y a escribir. En tan solo 5 meses, ya que antes no sabía ni firmar. Sin más, se despide de usted, revolucionariamente, Juana Miranda Medeiros. A significant aspect of being assessed as a literate was the learner's ability to sign their name instead of marking an X in the official document. This, it was commented, was dehumanizing. Sergio Paz says, I remember with emotion when Saba learned how to write and sign his name. We hugged and shed tears of joy. Sergio Paz, that I interviewed in 2020 in Ciego de Avila, Cuba. And another alfabetizado, which was described by Patterson, I want you to teach me how to sign my name. If before the year is over, I can write Luis Santana, I will be satisfied. And then when Luis managed to sign his name, and then he said, now you can sign your name and not just your thumbprint. Next slide, please. A sense of belonging. La Carlota, Agosto 30 de 1961, Año de la Educación. 1961 was declared Año de la Educación because that was the year of the literacy campaign. Dr. Fidel Castro, primer ministro de la República. Después de mi afectuoso saludo, paso a decir que ya sé leer y escribir. Gracias a usted, Fidel, gracias a nuestra revolución socialista, porque si no fuera por la revolución todavía fuera un analfabeto, pero como antes le dije, ya sé leer, y puedo enterarme de todo lo que se pasa, porque me siento cubano y estoy con la revolución hasta morir o vencer. Venceremos. Y sin más, muy atento, su amigo Antonio Ramírez. Here, I think we can see that Antonio Ramirez was really responding to the word, the given word that you must write and sign a letter to Fidel, and he did it with enthusiasm and pride, and one can say that, well, I mean, he really was part of the system, inverted commas. Another one said, I never really felt Cuban until I learned to read or write. That was Juan Martinez, who wrote to Fidel Castro on the 18th of September, 1961. And then the sense of belonging reflects also the alphabetizados' concrete reality and personal benefit. I quote this from this alphabetizado who said, I don't know what communism is, but agrarian reform, free doctors and hospitals, and my chance to read and write is what La Revolution means to me, end quote. The alphabetizados were made aware of the practical and political benefit that La Revolution would bring to them personally. Slide number 8.
You've got 2 more minutes, Alpha.
Yeah. This card is the Felicia, and I'm going to translate English because that was her letter as it appears there with all the grammar and the punctuation. I write to let you know that now I know how to read and write thanks to our socialist and democratic revolution. That's why I'm writing to you, so you can see with your own eyes. I take leave with a firm revolutionary and democratic salute. I used to be illiterate, Felicia Campobasso, literacy worker Wilfred. Father Ole, doing literacy work, we shall triumph. And slide 9, please. This is the Gilda taught in a batay, a shanty town camp where Haitian sugarcane cutters live, a place with no electricity or running water. Gilda was one of the 8 alphabetizadores. They taught 11 immigrants from Haiti. Gilda remember one Haitian alphabetizador whose Spanish name was given as Alfredo Polal, Yani. Gilda described Paul, as she called him, as a very soft-spoken man and who always bring her Platino Manzanos to thank her for a lesson. When it was time for Paul to write his letter to Fidel Castro, he put Gilda in a difficult position as Paul insisted on writing a thank you letter to Gilda and not to Fidel Castro. Finally, they have a compromise found between them and between Paul. And his native patois, Haitian patois, he wrote, Gracias a Fidel Castro y Maestra Gilda. This shows that literacy was not uniformity. It further shows that the alphabetizadores could not be said to have belonged, could have been said to belong to institutions, whereas the alphabetizadores seemed to be running free. Finally, slide 10, the humanism and intimacy of the alphabetizador. I used to read in your eyes what your heart was telling me. Now I can read it in your letters. Now, my love, I'm beginning to live. Now the fatherland has given me a treasure. I have learned to read and write. This alphabetizador can now, in his own letters, tell his lover all that his soul needed to say. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Alpha. Aplauso. I think Raquel is applauding rather than speaking. So thank you very much, Alpha.
Thank you.
We are going to move on. You're getting lots of nice comments there. We're going to move on to our last paper for today. There is a documentary coming after that, but this is Steve. There's Steve and your colleagues from Santa Clara. I think they might also be here.
I hope they are, Pa. Thank you so much, and congratulations on what's been a fantastic conference so far.
Thank you very much.
I'm so impressed and really, 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 really blown away by some of the papers that we've had. I've got to share my screen.
Okay, if it doesn't work, I can do it as well because I've got it.
Window. Share.
Yep, it's working.
It's looking good.
Can you see that?
No, we can see the window, but we can't see your PowerPoint. So you need to make sure that you click on the thing that that you want to share.
Oh, right. Okay.
If not, I can do it.
So you can see my window, but you can't see the...
We saw the window with all the discs on it.
Right.
I've got it open here if you want.
Oh, hang on. Wait a minute. Let me try this one.
Okay. Hello, Denise. Buenos días. Buenas tardes.
Not working.
Fine.
No.
Let me
Can you share it?
Sure. And just say siguiente when you want the next slide, yeah?
Muy bien, gracias.
Ahí va. You can see that?
No. Yes. Can.
Yes.
Perfect.
Adelante.
Muy bien. Can you go to slideshow and show it a bit bigger, Pa, please? No, at the top on the screen.
So it's a little problematic when somebody else is sharing it. You're going to have to just keep it like that because it might not move. I'll try.
Oh, it's quite small, isn't it?
Okay, well, I'll try. Okay. If not, we'll just go back to where we are now.
Right. Okay. Oh, well. So
you can also zoom in, whoever is sharing. You can zoom in a little bit where it's at 68%. Yeah, exactly. Well, no, not as much, but yeah, a bit better. Thank you.
Okay, well, I hope everyone can see that. I'll put my my email's address at the end, but I'll put it in the chat so that if anybody wants the slides or the paper that we've written, I'm very happy to send it to you. So this is a paper that's been co-written by myself and 3 of the teachers from the Universidad Central Las Villas Marta Abreu, and from the teacher training, the English or the foreign language teacher training faculty there. Some of them are with us. I think Dennis Raúl Cardoso Rodríguez está. Diana, yo creo que tiene problemas con la conexión y no sé si Ivani ha llegado, pero this was next slide, please. Bart? Oh, thank you. So this study focuses on the English language teaching at Marta Abreu, as it's called. And I was first drawn to doing this when I visited there about 18 months ago with a group of my students from the University of Buckingham. And we had an exchange with the students from the Faculty of Foreign Language Teacher Training. And I was so impressed by the capacity of the students to speak, particularly the skills of speaking and listening in English, because I was witnessing the conversations they were having with my students, none of whom had any Spanish at all. And I commented to Diana, who is one of the co-authors, while we were watching the students interact. And I just said, how do you do it? You know, you've got these students that can communicate so well in English, and yet I should imagine being in Villa Clara, just outside Santa Clara, as everybody knows, it's in the middle of the island, and it's, despite being the resting place of Che and the heroes, which is an attraction, it only really attracts tourists for a day who tend to stop there and then pass through. And so it's not a place where there is a great deal of contact with speakers of English, native speakers of English. And she just said, well, we have our own methods. And I thought, well, that would be interesting to study. So I arranged to go back. And in February this year, I spent some time at the university to investigate the methodologies and the secret, really, of the success of this faculty in the middle of Cuba. And this is the concept. This is the result of the exploration, if you like. Next slide, please, Pa. So I found out doing some literature searches that, in fact, there is an amazingly high level of professional proficiency and a long history of research into English language teaching methodology at Marta Abreu. And in the paper, there is quite a comprehensive section on previous papers that are being produced by the staff at the faculty. So there is a long commitment to academic investigation in the department. Next slide, please. So what I did was I took a qualitative approach, and I had a number of, in fact, there were in the end 4 semi-structured interviews of a focus group type. 2 with teachers and 1 with students, done by myself in the first instance, and then subsequently 1 other with students that was done by my co-writer, Dennis Cardoso. And I also did some classroom observation of teaching that took place there. Transcribed, I took notes during the observation, and then recorded the interviews and transcribed them and did a thematic analysis of the interviews. And the discussion of that is in detail in the paper, which I won't go into great detail with now, but I asked a series of questions to prompt the discussion, and then allowed the discussions to take place quite freely. But the main research questions were the following: what is the pedagogy of English language teacher education at the school? What is the experience of teaching and learning the English language in this Cuban university context? How are identities of teachers and learners influenced by the learning of English? And what teaching and learning techniques and strategies do teachers and learners in the faculty consider to be the most suitable and effective English language acquisition? Next slide, please. Pa, thank you. So I'm going to go through 3 slides now, showing really to discuss the key findings from the thematic analysis. And here pictured are the products, the professional products of the staff at the school. You can see there are 2 volumes of what's called Integrated English Practice, which are the main textbooks that are used at the school, written by members of the staff. And there is one example of a book called Searching, which is a student book. There are 2 books in that series which are used for the teaching of English. And there is a very academic book on the right, Discourse Analysis for Foreign Language Teacher Education, which was also written by a member of staff at the school. And these books are the main textbooks that are used there. And they are developed from learning about the communicative language teaching methodology. Anybody here who knows anything about language teaching knows that the communicative method is the one that is most considered to be the best practice, and has been for some time. And teachers at this faculty became familiarized with it from the mid-1980s onwards, and really learned the basic elements of this technique, and have taken Western produced materials and completely adapted them for the Cuban specific context. And of course, that means making it absolutely totally relevant to the Cuban revolutionary context and the Cuban society, which is quite a feat, because of course the materials that they're working from were all produced in advanced capitalist Western environments, and have an ideological and cultural nature which is completely alien to what the Cuban Revolution is trying to do. So this is a revolutionary adaptation, if you like, of a methodology that they've taken from the advanced, developed capitalist countries. In the foreground, or sorry, Pa, could you just go back one for a second? Sorry. In the foreground, you see 2 books there, which are called Arrowmite. These are books that were produced by members of the faculty in collaboration with Canadians to create a literacy program under the Yo Si Puedo. And this connects to the previous paper. Alpha was talking about the alphabetización campaign, the literacy campaign. And these were books that have been used amongst the Inuit population in Canada to teach them literacy. And these books were written by members of the staff at the faculty. Next slide, please. So as the secrets of success, I would say, lie in the teaching strategies. I would just say that this photograph is really interesting. You can see the configuration of the tables being in a U shape, you can see an activity being performed there, which is a typical communicative English language activity where students are in real time given a task which is meaningful. It involves writing out solutions to a problem on pieces of paper, and then an interaction between the students in the target language in problem solving using the solutions that have been written on the paper. And the teacher there is Deanna, you can see leaning over in the striped top. And on the tables, you can see that the students have smartphones. And this is a very interesting factor, that although you can see there's no smart board, there's only still a chalk board. But you can see the students all have smartphones. And of course, anybody who's been to Cuba recently knows that they have an excellent data system now, which is supplied by a Texer, and it gives everybody very cheap access to the internet. And so students were asked to actually use their smartphones and even chat GPT to help them find solutions to a problem. Incidentally, in this particular class, the topic of the discussion was ecology and ecological problems and ways to solve problems of environmental degradation on a local basis. And that fitted with one of the main themes that currently are part of the Cuban national curriculum, which is to impart a sense of responsibility towards the environment, and as part of trying to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, which have been set by the United Nations. It's all extremely interesting, the way that these greater themes are integrated into students' education, practice, and learning. Next slide, please. And the other factor that I would say is very, very important, which actually sets this department apart, is the way in which there is a tremendous enthusiasm amongst the teaching staff. And I would say that this is in part, and I don't wish to be too gender oriented about this, but I did take note of the fact that of the 16 members of staff, 12 of them are women. And there is a real sense of solidarity and professional commitment amongst the group of teachers. And there is a generational continuity. In other words, there is a group of teachers that were formerly leaders of the department who have retired but returned to give classes. There are teachers then that were their students who have graduated at the school but stayed there to teach, who are now in charge. And then there is a younger generation who were the teachers of that group of teachers, beginning to teach in the department. So there are 3 generations of students, all of whom know each other and were taught by the previous generation. And this has created a very cohesive department, something that is very, very rare. I mean, I've never seen it in any of my own professional life, both as a secondary school teacher and as a university teacher. There is no department that I've ever been in which has been quite like it. And there is a massive commitment to professional development, and there is a very well-established system of teachers giving open classes where colleagues participate in the class, take part and observe each other's teaching and learn from each other. And it's a very well-established part of the life of the school. And at the same time, this has engendered a really strong sense of community, both amongst the students and the teachers, which is quite infectious, and it motivates the students highly to engage with English both inside the classroom and beyond, outside the classroom. So they spend a great deal of time practicing their English by watching English language movies and so on. And in the interviews, they talked very much about this and about the way in which they take their lessons home and practice conscientiously outside the classroom.
Couple more
Next
minutes, Steve.
Pa?
2 more minutes.
Yes, it's coming to an end now. Thanks. Next slide. So this quotation is from Diana, and it sums up really that particular point. I think that probably the tool that has worked for many, many years is that we're feeling that we have as a family. I mean, we are colleagues, we are friends, but we are family, and the students also feel part of the family. And you can see from the picture just how much that holds true. So the last slide now, please, Pa. So the conclusions. Marta Abreu's approach offers valuable lessons, I think, for language education, especially in resource-limited settings. The success factors that I identified are meticulous adoption of best practices and adaptation of them, the creation of authentic and culturally relevant materials to the students, and a very supportive and reflective learning environment. And I think some of the lessons should be very applicable to other contexts where there is a resource-limited setting. So last slide, which contains the contact details. Thank you. Diana is with us. They can see she's on the screen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Diana. Muchas gracias. Y Denis. Okay, I'm going to propose, if Helen is here. Helen, are you in the meeting? Buenos días, buenas tardes.
Hello.
Hello, Helen. I'm just looking at the time here. I'm wondering, could we have just 5 minutes of questions for Alpha and Steve, and then maybe just a quick introduction from you? Here's my proposal, and then I'm going to show the film, but would you be able to come back tomorrow during the brindis so people can ask questions?
I think so. What time is it? Remind me.
It's tomorrow at, just because otherwise we're all probably going to...
Yeah, it's getting late.
It is getting late. So the brindis will be at 6 p.m. tomorrow.
Yeah, I think I can do that.
Fantastic. So that's our plan. Ese es el plan. Vamos a hacerles preguntas, 5 minutos de preguntas para Alpha y Steve, Diana y Denis. Y después Helen va a presentar o darnos una presentación breve sobre el documental. Voy a dejar el documental puesto y mañana le hacemos las preguntas a Helen. Gracias, Helen. Thank you for being so understanding. I have a copy of Steve's paper, of the original paper that you've all written, Dennis, Diana, Steve, and others, if anybody wants it, and I will put it on the Google Drive for us to share. Preguntas. So, questions for Steve or for Alpha. Alpha, do you want to make yourself visible? Are you there? Have we lost? Oh, no, there he is.
Yeah,
You're there.
So he's got a laptop.
Okay, great. So, anybody have any questions? Hands up. Jackie, please go ahead. Just keep it a little brief because it's been a long day.
Can't hear.
Steve's paper.
Sorry, can't hear you very well.
Can you hear me now?
No.
Just.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
perfect.
I enjoyed both papers, but it's just relation to your Steve. I wonder if you or someone else from your team could say what kind of adaptations, like give a few examples of the adaptations that needed to be included to make it to make the materials relevant to the revolutionary context.
Oh, muy bien. Denis o Diana, ¿puedes contestar eso? Sobre las adaptaciones que hicieron a las materiales para acabar o contextualizarlo a la situación cubana.
Hello, everybody. I'll give the floor to Diana. She knows about that like very much. She can do it.
Can you
Diana?
hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know if you hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually what we did Well, we started adapting materials because, as Stephen said, the context was very different. But what we really did was like creating the materials as such. So we took into account our context. We also took into account the help of people from people like Canadian people who have been helping us and sharing with us for many, many years. And they help us recording the dialogues and also taking into consideration that these materials were created for teacher trainers. Because if we use, for instance, Spectrum or any other material that was made for simply teaching people to learn the basics of the English language, but what we wanted was not that. We wanted people to learn about the language, but also to be trained as a foreign language teachers in a Cuban context, which is a very different context from other countries in the world, because we don't share frequently with foreigners from different parts of the world. We live in an island, and in an island that has been under a blockade. So mainly what we did was creating our own materials, and we have been struggling really hard, but we have been learning, and we are really happy for doing that.
Gracias, Diana. Thank you, Diana. Other questions, other comments for Alpha, for Steve, for Diana, for Dennis? Yesterday we had, I think this is a question for all of you. Yesterday we had two panels, a long panel about education in contemporary Cuba. And really from a perspective of the anthropology of education. So what is happening in terms of policy and how that is affecting the motivations of young people to continue in their education and then to stay in education afterwards. Either of you, either groups, either Steve and your colleagues from Santa Clara or Alpha, do you want to comment a little bit about that values of motivation, of commitment to education, not necessarily about contemporary Cuba, but about the areas that you're both working in? Alpha, you're nodding, so please, I'll give you the word. Just unmute yourself, don't forget. There we go.
Yeah.
Nope.
Right. I know of two students, one in Havana and one in Pilar del Rio. With the one in Havana, we had a very, very long discussion while I was there in
Oh, he's gone. You've gone. You've muted yourself.
He's muted his mic. He's muted his mic.
I've muted his mic. It's my fault. It's been a long day. Sorry, Alpha.
Alpha, you have to wait.
I have not muted.
No, Paz censored you.
And again.
You're back again. You're back again. I'm sorry. It's me. You know, I don't believe in free speech. Go ahead.
And he was saying that the reason why he doesn't want to continue his studies, he was at university, first year university, and he just said that he doesn't think that that's right for him, that he wanted to do something that kind of vocational job, to have a job, but to study at the same time as having a job. But the one in Pinar del Rio actually abandoned the university against his mother's will, which was a really, real big fight. And because I knew him very well, and I was trying to convince him to change, to just say that it's never late for him to get on to learning a skill afterward. But let's get the basic foundation in terms of education first. Once you get that, then at least you can say that I've got this in my pocket now. Now I can try to go and find out something else. But there's a pressure, there's economic pressure, and one should not be blind into that. There's a big time economic pressure that I have seen, I have discussed with the people who say that they were the victim of it. and that they needed to do something to find a job in order to not just help themselves, but to say to help their family. These are 20, 21. And sometime I had one in 19. So it's very difficult. But I think it's a general, I would take it me, not just as Cuba, because okay, I'm an educationist, I'm a teacher too. And then I've been leading a faculty, but at the same time, I was also a tutor of year 12 and year 13. Now I have had a discussion with certain people while I was doing my teaching, especially year 12, year 13, who were given into the ideology of you can't do the general education. Go and do some practice. Go and do some vocational study. But that went alongside the narrative of the time, because we were then under the government of conservative government, and it was Michael Gove was pushing through, as the education secretary, was pushing through the idea of the vocational studies, and then went on even to say to blame the expert in a debate, in political debate, political discourse. So those were also permeating into the mind of the youngsters. What can I do? Have I got any chance of continuing studies? When I get the degree, what do I do?
Yeah.
Will it be worth it? Will I have lost all these time?
Could I just say, Pa, that just to pick that up and put it back into the Cuban situation, when I was, one of the most impressive things that I found, and Diana and Dennis are here and they will attest to it, is just how committed the students I met were to their studies. They were, we hear a lot. My experience of Cuba has always been that the young generation, they're not revolutionary and they're not ideologically committed like their parents were, etc., etc. But it seems to be the same thing I've heard through about 4 generations now. And this generation that I met in Santa Clara, they had a commitment to what they were doing. They wanted to be secondary school teachers or primary school teachers, and they wanted to teach languages, and they were training to do that. And they were, like everybody else, suffering enormously from the effects of the blockade. As we all know, it's got worse recently, and yet they were very, very stoic. And they were stoically continuing their studies, and they had a vocation to be teachers and to teach in Cuba. They weren't thinking of leaving, and I found that extremely inspiring, I have to say, quite honestly. And I was moved to tears many times.
Very briefly, Alpha.
I agree with you, Steve. I've been also to the Mata Abu University of Central Las Vegas. I was there also in February 2020. And also at the one in the Pinar del Rio, the Federico Engels University. What students were telling me in Mata Abu that our president come from this university. We like our university. We're going to work hard to make sure. So they were proud of the university. And equally in Federico Engels in Pinar del Rio, they were also very technical. It's a very advanced college, and they were very proud. Not just proud of the university, but proud doing things in the community as well. So yeah, indeed, they are. What you say is right. They're there, but it is true there are some that also want to give up their studies.
I think you should connect up with Alexander Cordovez, and you should remind them to expand their studies beyond the University of Havana, so they can see Cuba in all of its diversity and all of its complexity, because I think the motivations and the objectives and the ethos of education changes just as it does in Britain. It changes from place to place. And we can say the same for Cuba. So thank you all. I am going to stop now, but thank you both. Thank you all for your contributions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are still recording, and so I'm just going to leave the recording on, Helen, if you don't mind. If you want to just introduce your film. Thank you so much for being so patient. We will come back to you tomorrow for the question and answer. Over to you.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
So Cuban Bees, the Organic Revolution. I think some of you might know the previous documentary that I I co-produced with Danny Films, who is, you know, responsible for all of the artistic and creative aspects of the projects. The other documentary was Cuba's Life Task Combating Climate Change, and it was about Tarea Vida, the state plan to confront climate change. And this was a really obvious follow-up because the theme of organic agriculture and the theme of bees kept emerging. So it was a theme that we pursued with this documentary. And also, I had a student who appears in the documentary, the lovely Emma Shannon, who had taken my course at Cuba and was really inspired and really interested, but she was also a member of the beekeeping student society. So she managed to combine her two interests and do her undergraduate dissertation on beekeeping in Cuba. And then obviously she came into our documentary as well. So I'm going to leave you all to watch it. I'll be back at 6 o'clock tomorrow. And I hope you enjoy. The film's done really, really well, much better than we ever expected in terms of festival selections and awards. And it's only short, so don't panic. I know it's been a very long day and it's quite hard to be looking at a screen. So thank you very much for the invite, and I'll leave you to start.
That's great. Thank you, Helen. I'm going to stop recording because it is actually,